Welcome back. The controversial Marriage Laws Amendment Bill was today referred to a group of ministers after differences cropped up in the cabinet over clauses dealing with a woman's right to marital property in case of divorce. The Law Ministry had suggested that a woman should be given a share in residential property of her husband, including inherited and inheritable property, even property basically that the husband had acquired before marriage. That's what it means. But the Women and Child Development Ministry has opposed that, saying that property acquired by the husband before marriage should be kept out of the purview of the law.
As the government debated new clauses to the marriage law, these protesters voiced their apprehensions outside. Their placards said giving women an equal share of their husband's property, even acquired before marriage, and even property inherited or property that could be inherited later, was terribly unfair.
एक रात की शादी में रात को लड़की बोलेगी दिया आदमी मेरे लिए ठीक नहीं है, मैं इससे शादी नहीं करना चाहती, आगे नहीं करना चाहती, और प्रॉपर्टी लेके चले जाएगी.
इस तरह एक अवैध शोषण शुरू हो जाएगा जो देश के लिए बड़ा खतरनाक है.
The dissent was reflected also in the cabinet. NDTV has learned that union ministers like Kamal Nath and Manish Tiwari voiced their apprehensions on the new law, including property that was to be inherited later, where according to the proposal, if the property was jointly owned, the wife would be compensated. Women and Child Development Minister Krishna Tirath was even more vehement in her protest. She's written to the Law Ministry. She feels that only property gained during the period of marriage should be divided. Seeing a divided house, the cabinet has now referred the matter to a group of ministers.
Different opinions does not mean a difference of opinion.
There are countries all across the world in which women have been recognized as equal partners, have been given equal rights.
For women's rights activists, this is a major setback, especially since the amendments include progressive provisions like giving equal rights to adopted children and the inclusion of irretrievable breakdown as a ground for divorce with a safety net of 6 months.
There are two aspects of a marriage and a divorce. It's the social focus and it is the legal status of it.
With the UPA government counting down towards the next elections and with frequent disruptions in parliament, will this legislation be a priority for the government? With Sunil Prabhu in New Delhi, Sunetra Chaudhary for NDTV.
And so should divorced women get a share of the husband's property that's been acquired before marriage? That's the question we're asking tonight. You can also take part in this debate via our second screen app on your iOS or Android devices and vote on the questions that you'd like to ask the panel this evening. Well, joining us tonight, we have the Director for Centre for Social Research, Ranjana Kumari, who knows a lot on this subject. We have senior lawyer Kirti Singh joining us as well. We have actor Kabir Bedi joining us from Mumbai tonight, and Atit Rajpara, the President of the Men's Rights Association, joining us this evening from Pune. Yes, there is a Men's Rights Association. Okay, let me ask Ranjana Kumari first. Why isn't alimony enough? Why should women get property that their husbands acquired before marriage or property that belongs to their families?
Well, Nidhi, alimony is always pittance because it will be established by the court. In most of the cases nowadays, people have become smart. They will disinherit the son. He will show that he has lost his job. He has no income. And in fact, if it is an earning woman, then they would try to always show to the court that the woman is making more money than the husband himself is making. So that's one issue. That how
it's
much
manipulated. You
it's
say. The system is
absolute manipulation
okay.
all the way. And secondly, even after court has decided, in many cases, people have just turned their back, they have not paid, and nothing has happened because the woman will have to go to the court back again to get it from the court established again, and kind of whatever punishment. So there hardly anybody who has not paid alimony has been punished by the court. Hardly. Now Kirti is on the program, I'm sure she will add on to this. Thirdly, it's important that in marriage, globally in marriage, we have been talking about decades in women's movement about women's right to matrimonial property, because after having set up the house, and people are absolutely misinterpreting by saying that one night marriage, one day marriage, it is only in the eventuality of divorce Let's be very clear about that. When divorce takes place, then the woman will claim her right to the property, and it is in the residential property that she gets 50% of the residence. And it's already there in the domestic violence law, where you cannot drive the woman out of the home. You have to give her living right in the residence that you have. So already partly it has been already approved by the parliament. So I don't understand what is this hoo-ha about.
But Kabir Bedi, I think the question is, one is of course what when you're married to someone for an X number of years, the property that the two of you acquire together, that being split between the two of you. But do you believe it's necessarily fair that property that the husband acquired before he got married to her, or property that belongs to his family that he may inherit later, that is fair, and that necessarily to the man?
Nidhi, my point of view is very simple here, that the central issue here is respect and equity and justice for women. If that is the basic objective, then we have to look at the law in that context. Now, I agree with what the previous speaker said, that this is a very progressive piece of legislation, because the majority of India, which is, let's say, people in the rural areas where land is the issue, they never show the land in the name of the younger married people. It is always in the name of the parents. It's always hidden. If there's the slightest whiff of a problem or divorce, things are changed. It's a question of how you get justice for women. Now, I also make the point here that obviously if a woman marries a Maharaja who owns 20 palaces and 1 year later leaves him, she can't own half his property. There has to be a proportionality between the claim that a woman has on a man's property, marital, during marriage and ancestral, depending on the length of time she spent together in the marriage, and also depending on, in case of divorce, what are the needs of the custodial parent. I think to address that, the new law, which is the Marriage Law Amendment Bill draft, is a very progressive piece of legislation, especially in a country like India, because if people felt that by throwing out the woman they're going to lose land, they will not throw out the woman. They will do anything to save their land. They love their land. The same thing in the cities, where people have businesses or people have assets. If they realize they're going to lose that, which includes the inherited and inheritable part of their inheritance, they will treat women with far more respect. And the central issue here is women's respect. So I support it.
Okay, you support it. So Mr. Rajpara, you heard there a man, a very well-known man in this country, who says this is a progressive legislation. Why do you think that this amounts to harassment of men then?
Yes, certainly I will say, first thing is, I will not call this law as a marriage amendment bill. I will call this law as a Malamal Weekly. Certainly, why? Because this
I think please
law
come up with
says
argument and
the
don't
only
start
husband
making cheap
property is
language.
going to be divided.
I think please maintain the dignity of this discussion
let
and
me
don't
complete
use
my
this kind of
Kumari.
language.
Okay,
Please.
let him finish. Just try to be a little better in the
Let me
language.
complete it.
Yes.
Why I am telling this, I am coming to it also. Don't interrupt it.
Okay, well, we lost that line to him, so I will go to Kirti
hua?
Singh. Ms. Singh, let me ask you what the concerns have been raised by the other side. There are leading divorce lawyers who, I'm quoting here from previous reports, have said that they fear, as Kabir Bedi also raised, that the provision will hurt affluent men the most. The wealthy or high net worth individuals could be the target, and this is something that could be used and abused against them. How would you respond to that criticism?
Well, first of all, I'd like to make the point, Nidhi, that this law doesn't go all the way in recognizing equal property rights for women, because what it says is that in the residential property, which is the residence that the parties are living in, she will have a half share, and it says that in the movable property, she will have a half share. But it doesn't say that in any of the other land or property that the parties may have bought, she will have a half share. And I think it's important to consider the woman as an equal partner in the house. It is important to say that she has contributed contributed as much, or that her non-financial contribution is of as much importance as is the financial contribution of men, and therefore the first proposition I want to put is that both should be equally entitled to share everything if the marriage breaks down. So it's not, this law cannot be misused. It's only something that the woman should be entitled to if the marriage breaks down. Now when we come to the house where the parties have been living in, sometimes what happens is that they are living in say a property which might have been inherited by the husband, and the laws in Canada and in several other places state that as far as the home of the parties is concerned, the woman will have an equal share even if the person has inherited the property. Why? In our own state of Goa, we have the law the communion of property law, which applies to inherited property as well. In the state of California, inherited property is also a part of it. Of course, you can have prenuptial agreements.
I come back to the point that
regulate the thing.
It's one thing to divide. It's one thing to divide that property, which you've acquired together. But why? Why should it extend to
being included?
Okay, Mr. Rajpara is back, but I'm asking Kirti Singh
And
first.
what is the
Why?
contribution of my wife?
Are we encouraging stereotypes?
I don't think I've made myself clear.
Yeah, no, I'm saying
What is the contribution
Mr.
of wife
Rajpara,
into
one
the
second.
inherited
Mr.
property?
Rajpara, 1 second, please. I will come to you. You will get your turn. Kirti, I was just asking that a lot of women who are financially independent, for instance, let's say, they may not even accept alimony. Okay, so the point is that should it necessarily extend to a property that was there before marriage, inherited property? Is that fair? We come back to that same point that are we encouraging stereotypes in marriages,
I'm only talking
encouraging
of those
women to be financially dependent
you see,
on men in
what will happen
marriages?
is,
Yes.
No. This is not a question of dependence. This is a question of rights. It's only property which the woman has helped to maintain or acquire, or property which she may have herself contributed to, that she will normally have a right. Only as far as a residence, as a home is concerned. Supposing a woman and her children and the husband have been living in a house for 20 years, supposing that house has been inherited by her husband, then would you deny her a residence when the marriage breaks down if she doesn't have an alternative? Because the law will always provide for alternatives, and I think that one cannot deny for home and for residence. One can at least
that's
have
a fair point. That's definitely a fair point.
There are lots of instances
That's
in
all
India
there in the
where
law,
joint.
Let me come back to you. Let me
No,
come
yes,
back to you
Mr.
here.
Rajpara.
Why?
Yes, Mr. Rajpara, we can do this without losing our cool though. And once again, we've lost the signal. I'm not even going to try and go back there.
That's
bad luck. Yes,
not
Radhika.
fair, because perhaps he has a lot of things that he may have wanted to say. But I think two clarifications are very important
I
at
wanted to say
this.
this law can't be misused, Nidhi. I don't know why we should go on with
Kirti,
that.
I think
because
the
she
point is
just saying, recognize me.
Yeah, I think the point is here that should a woman who lives in a marriage, and when the marriage breaks down, should she be forced out of the home with her children, where the husband is not willing to pay the fee, the rent for the house, nothing, and should she not have any kind of right over the property that together they made over the years? Should she not live in the same house where she was living with her children? I think this is the issue at the moment.
But what about the issue of proportionality that Kabir Bedi
law
raised? The issue of proportionality that Kabir Bedi raised, that it also must depend on the length of time?
Absolutely.
A woman is married to a man.
I think there are certain conditions.
What if a divorce happens within a year? What happens if because there are short-term marriages?
Look, there are globally these laws have been in practice, and I think at the time of divorce,
this clause can come into operation.
Absolutely.
About half in.
No, sorry.
No.
So how many
Kirti,
years?
let me just clarify that there has to be also the kind of property.
Residential properties can.
I think, Kirti, let me just complete 1 minute. I think the whole idea is that, you use the word spouse, so that both of their properties are put together, and also that both of their contribution are acknowledged, and both of them get equal share. So when you say spouse, then you are really making it gender neutral also. It should not be, interpreted by anybody
what is
as worried.
What
because
is a
women
marriage that is long enough to justify?
Well, those things
Yeah.
can be settled. That you can't have a marriage which is one day marriage, which these people are saying,
Or a 1
and
year.
is not part
What
of
if
the
a marriage breaks down after 1 year?
Well, fine. Then certainly the woman has a right over livelihood of her own and her own children in case she has a child. Even if she doesn't have a child, I think, look, three things that determine discrimination against women: unequal access to power, which we have. We are not getting equal representation. Unequal access to property.
Listen, can I
Families do not give any property to daughter, and in-laws don't give any. Husband will not give any access to property, right to property. So isn't women discriminated against? And then progeny.
Only
and the
9%
progeny.
women
Yeah.
in this country have property.
Absolutely.
Do you know that we had done a survey of 400 women separated and divorced, and that 70% went back to their parental home to live. They were dependent on them. 80% of them went with their children. That the divorce is extremely harsh on women in India today, and therefore only less than 20% women actually ask for a divorce. They would rather stretch their marriage out in the hope that they will finally get something rather than ask
But
for
let
a
me ask
divorce.
Kabir Bedi
And
then.
so these are
Kabir-
the statistics staring at her.
Okay, Kabir Bedi, what is proportionality according to you? I mean, what is a reasonably long marriage according to you?
Depends.
Isn't that hard to
That's something
define?
that's obviously going to have to be debated. I mean, somebody can say that a married man's marriageable life is 20 years, 40 years, 50 years. That's his marriageable life. So if he has a certain marriage and he remarries, what's the rights of the second wife? There's all those. That's something that will have to be arrived at by consensus. But the point is, it has to be a substantial period where, if especially ancestral property is involved, sharing of that has to be really made proportional in a way that's equitable for the woman and not extortionate for the man. And finding that balance is really important, because the only way to do that is if the rights are put in such a way that a woman has a clear claim, and that clear claim will have to be refuted by the man if he believes he's in the right. So, in human cases and situations, they're all very complex relationships and webs of ownership that happen. The central principle to remember is that there has to be equity and justice for women, and they need to be protected against the manipulation of the ownership of property, the ownership of assets that are often hidden and often not even given to the children. So the issue here is that if a man is, say, married to a woman, say 25 years, 30 years, has spent a good lifetime with her, and a divorce happens, then I think the inheritable property of the husband should be valued,
But the
and if
question
it can't
is,
be divided for any reason,
we come back
the
to
woman
the
should be given
subjectivity
appropriate
of what
compensation for that.
Yeah, sure. I think we just come back to the subjectivity then of
I think let's not even talk of inheritance. First,
No, one of the. I'm
First,
just going
give us,
to
equal
end
rights in
with
the
one
property
question
that has
asked
been
from one of our
acquired.
viewers. Sumit Vadva says, "Why shouldn't men have the same right to wives' properties?"
Well, I say spouse. Did I not
Yeah,
say
yeah.
spouse? And I think
They
that's
should.
what
They absolutely should.
They should. Who's saying
By
it
the
is?
same token.
In fact, I have gone to the level of risk, because a lot of our constituents, especially women's groups, may not agree on gender neutrality of the law, but it has to be. So, if woman is rich and she has all this, and she's throwing the husband out, perhaps she is supposed to give something. And last thing, Nidhi, about how long should the marriage? Do you know that progressively we will have shorter marriage period when the marriages will last much shorter time? Everywhere in globally, marriages may last only 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, whatever.
Why
So
should
50-year marriage, who's
Why should someone
imagining
who's married
50-year
6
marriage?
months get 50% of the guy's property?
Why not? But why not? The child born out of the same woman becomes
not of the guy's
50% after
property,
what
but
period
I
of
think
time?
Why
6
should
months?
she?
6 months, come on.
Well,
6 months, what?
okay.
what they
Set it
have
1 year.
gathered together, I
know.
think is important. Firstly,
Also, the parents are not giving right to their daughters in their property. Look at the discrimination. So she gets, in spite of the fact that we have inheritance
has to be
property
remedied.
right, parents don't give to daughter, in-laws will not give, husband
That's
will not give.
another issue.
What kind of a system are we living in? Women don't have any right over
The
property.
law needs to be enforced.
Absolutely.
All right, very interesting debate. Do wish we did have the Men's Association with us tonight, because they have very strong views. They were protesting on the streets of Delhi today outside the Prime Minister's residence against this bill. So we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out, because currently there are huge political differences on this bill as well. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight. That's it on the show this evening. We'll see you tomorrow.